Bull Demon stood frozen for a while, panted heavily, chest heaving as it forced itself to stand tall, basking in the victory it had earned. But that didn't last long. Exhaustion took over, and its head lolled to the side, body swaying, until some lunatic elbowed it right in the chest. It was the kangaroo, who jumped in out of nowhere and helped in the most aggressive way possible. Then he even gave Bull Demon a side-eye like, "Don't you dare fall now. It's not easy to win." Suddenly, a familiar light flickered inside the portal. It kept shooting out like lightning, flew straight out the gate, curved up high, and landed on top of the black spire, right in front of Bull Demon. Fast like a blade flash, of course. It was Peregrine Falcon's big bro, Big Bird. He must have drunk Red Bull beforehand, that even blood was pouring from his wings. He'd still be here without any delay. Before Bull Demon asked about the wings, he barked, "I'm fine. I can still hold on. You stay here and stabilize the situation. Don't let anything else go wrong." Technically, it should have been Big Bird's job to take care of the Black Pillar. But seeing Brother 2 handle it so well, he kept it brief and soared straight back toward the portal. "Bye! I have to go alert the others." Bull Demon gripped the lava axe. As if recharged by sheer will, energy surged around it as he raised the axe high. Spirit power rained down from the heavens, transforming Bull Demon into something almost divine. That change didn't go unnoticed. Those mutant beasts below all looked up, their beady eyes locking onto the Black Pillar. No mouths to speak, but they seemed to understand what was about to happen. They all swarmed to the base of the tower, trampling over each other trying to climb it, looking like ants drawn to raw meat. "Look! They're heading for the tower!" Shaman tribemen shouted, scrambling to chase after them. Bull Demon, done gathering energy, glanced back at Kang to warn, "Get out of here, or you'll get caught up in this too." The kangaroo didn't move right away, maybe weighing whether he could still help. Maybe Kang was thinking about staying here, shoulder with his new brother. But then he turned sharply and ran, calling back over the shoulder, "You better survive," before vanishing from the tower. There wasn't much time left. The whole mob of one-eyed beasts had arrived. Bull Demon stood tall, axe upright like a lightning rod, waiting for the moment they all came crashing down on it. "Fall with this tower, you son of the beach," Bull Demon roared. It could smell its own blood soaking through its dark skin, sticky and stiff. With a flash of gold, the axe swung down, clean and merciless. The moment the beasts arrived, they were swallowed in a blinding light. Moths to flame only ever meet one end. Boom! The explosion blasted out the top of the black spire, surging in all directions with shards of mutant flesh flying everywhere. The ground was splitting apart, giant chunks tossed like pebbles. Bull Demon looked like hell. The power he carried was terrifying, still strong enough to shake the heavens. The entire city that had already been turned inside out by the war now flipped upside down again. Bull Demon collapsed, knees hitting the ground. The axe stabbed into the dirt not far away. Not a single mutant survived that devastating blast. He lifted his head to the sky, squinted his eyes with one last thought before blacking out. "I leave the rest to you." And just like that, Bull Demon's world went quiet, silent, unlike the city still crumbling outside. Elsewhere, a flash flared up as something heavy slammed into the ground. It was Zelon, in transformed state, carefully leaping back to distance itself from its opponent. A squid? Not exactly. It stood there, unmoved, gazing at Zelon like it didn't even register the mantis as a threat. It hadn't shown many abilities yet. Zelon was now facing a real tough nut. It let out a series of sharp clicks, kek, 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 as if to psych itself up first. Were these gods really any different from the monsters it had fought across the universe? Only one way to find out. Smack into it head on. Zelon streaked and slammed straight into Oct's smug face. It just stood there, taking the full hit. Its body leaned slightly backward, not from the impact, but to brace against Zelon's attacking claw. That blue skin turned out to be insanely tough. The moment Zelon's scythe touched it, the blade shattered into pieces. Just like that. It was named Zelon, the Sharp Scythe. This wasn't some toy weapon, and it couldn't even pierce this guy. How is this different from before? Zelon's eyes burned with the question, but the arrogant god had no intention of hiding anything. "My body is made of the hardest material on this planet. I am the strongest defender among the 12 gods." It flailed its tentacles proudly, showing off both flexibility and defense. Fully balanced in offense and defense. Watch closely, insect. I am the god of material. But Zelon had faced worse. Way worse. "Stop farting around, will ya?" he roared, diving in again for a swing at the god's face. But this time, Oct was faster, landing a precise strike right across Zelon's face, sending the mantis flying back and seizing the upper hand. "What the hell?" Zelon shouted, teeth clenched as pain rippled from the impact, its prized armor cracking. And in that stunned moment, the stern face of Uzu flashed through its mind. How can you keep pace with Flash like this? Ever since its master force leveled it up, Zelon had never stopped trying. He never wanted to be speechless again when questioned like that. I've gotten stronger. I'm not a weakling anymore, he roared at Oct, but he was as if shouting to Uzu himself. All this time drifting alone in the void, fighting monsters across the cosmos, what was it for? He couldn't just help Misty Mountain once and die like this? No way. Zelon refused. With a burst of something, the space in front of it split, thin white cracks spidering outward. The tear stretched all the way to the god. Crackling sounds filled the air. The god of material sensed it too. Zelon's energy was rising fast. What's it doing now? The god stared it down, cautious. But Zelon wasn't summoning anything from the void. His energy was peaking, glowing white before flaring back to green and firing forward. This is not good. Oct whipped all its tentacles in front of its face, shielding up. But the little mantis came in faster and harder than expected, blasting the god a dozen meters back, lifting both off the ground and dragging it across the dirt before slamming down hard. Only spirit energy remained in the air, the god now pinned to the earth, its tentacles severed right up to the base. Blood spurted wildly. The god of material stared in disbelief as its severed limbs flew far away. What the hell? The vision turned red quickly. 1 second of distraction, and its defense had plummeted. It was dragged another distance before, boom, coming to a crashing stop. Zelon rose from his own dust cloud, panting with rasping breaths. Where was his opponent? Was it dead yet? Once the dust cleared, they could see each other clearly, even saw the 2 tentacles flying high into the sky. That's when the god freaked out and yelled, "My body! Was that cut?" Zelon didn't need the damn god to believe. He just needed to feel that rush. Even with only 1 claw left, he pulled it off. A loud, rattling screech echoed again, kek, 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 as the mantis arched its back and let out a shout of pure joy. See? I'm not weak. I was never weak, and I never will be. That surge of confidence made the god of matter boil with rage. I still have plenty of tentacles. Bring it on. Let's see how sharp that blade of yours really is. Can you dodge this many? The sly god blocked off all escape routes, tentacles flailing everywhere. But just like that, the mantis vanished right before his eyes. Or more like, he slipped into a narrow rift he had just torn open, disappearing before those crazy tentacles could touch his body. What the? Slipped into the void. The god blinked hard. Before the glow of the last rift even closed, a new slash lit up right behind him. Zelon zipped out, green claw first, slicing clean through one of the tentacles. With so many tentacles waving around, Zelon wanted a piece of everything. He swung a massive arc, slicing right through the giant body of his enemy. Oct was stunned again, glanced at its freshly sliced tentacle, blood spraying, and realized in shock. It wasn't just the tentacle. The leg had been cut too, and that's why it fell. But how the hell was he supposed to tell which part was a leg? Before he could find an answer, Zelon's crazy speed brought him right up in the god's face. The god thought Zelon would come at him from behind again, but no. The mantis swerved to the side at the last second and made a clean, sudden slash at another tentacle instead of aiming for the legs this time. The attack was so sudden and so simple, all the god's fancy defensive plans were useless. And just like that, it took heavy damage. Then, boom, like 20 beams of light crashed down from the sky, slicing through the air like a glowing cage to trap the god inside. Every time a beam slashed down, it looked like it only hit the outside, but each one cut straight into Oct. Slash after slash, keeled over, coughing hard. No mouth in sight, but blood just kept pouring out. All done, Zelon circled once in the air, then dove straight down like a thunderclap toward the center where the god of matter was. Mouth wide open, he let out a wild roar. Gak, 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 gak! This time, it attacked head-on, letting out a warning cry as it came, wild and fierce in both posture and form, like a clear declaration, "I'm here to take your life." Oh, you chopped off a few of my tentacles and already feeling proud? Up till now, the god of materials hadn't really struck back, had he? Well, now the real show was about to begin. Shrack! A blinding sphere of light flared to life, with the god of material at its center. Zelon charged in so quick, he couldn't slam the brakes in time, and got swallowed by the white light before he could react. The moment he touched it, everything blew up in a massive explosion. This power wasn't some joke. Everything within range was reduced to ash. Even the ground got seared into a giant checkerboard of charred cracks. Now, some folks might wonder, if Zelon could slice off those tentacles, how come they could tank an explosion like that? Well, It's cause the god of material had hardened the tentacles again, turning them into solid spears in full defense mode. In this form, the tentacles couldn't wiggle or lash, they turned stiff like stone statues. But here's the kicker. The god could switch between soft and hard at lightning speed. Even crazier, one single tentacle could have both states at once, flexible at the base, but rock hard and pointy at the tip. That's how one of them stabbed clean through Zelion's chest, like slicing tofu. Ha! I thought I could kill you even in my normal state. Gotta admit, you've got some skill. The god chuckled, pure mockery in his voice. Clearly, the god of material still had cards hidden up his sleeve, but Zelon didn't care one bit. Even with his body dangling like a rag doll from that tentacle, he fought back with everything he had. I haven't lost yet, it roared. But wait, what just shot back and slammed into Zelion's claws? Horror flooded its pupils. Not only its claws, but also its wings and two parts of its body were sliced into. A burst of power split into several streams, big and small, launching a surprise attack that left no time to react. Even now, they still glowed fiercely on one of the material god's tentacles. For you to witness the form of my god physique, you will be dying with a worthy death. As soon as those words dropped, a beam of light burst forth, filling nearly all of Zelion's field of vision, leaving only a sliver of its blood-red pupil visible. The mantis thrashed, couldn't dodge. Zelon choked. Damn it, was this really how it would end? Dying so helplessly? The divine light was stunning to look at, but it was pure destruction. Was it using too much force on Zelon, or was that just its usual strength? The beam carved a deep trench as it blasted out from the black pillar, scooping out a chunk of the structure. Looking again, the move had dug a massive ditch. The black pillar, which even the white tiger couldn't scratch, now had a huge dent. Where's Zelon? Had he turned to ash? A leg hit the ground, not from the material god, and not from Zelon either. This one was golden. The god froze, eyes wide, staring at the newcomer. Its stance was firm, but the cloak flapping in the wind gave it a rogue's flair. Zelion's still alive. Trying to rise from afar, he noticed two tiny glowing antennae. Wasn't that his wife? Flash, he gasped, stunned that his beloved had just saved him. Flash had made an epic entrance, swooping in to rescue Zelon in the blink of an eye, then turning back to stare coldly at the creature without saying a word. Her presence, her aura, it made the material god hesitate. Golden in color, with an ant's head and crimson eyes full of killing intent locked on him. Surely she was one of the top-tier beings from the enemy's side? Are you one of the 10 great beasts? It asked, half in disbelief. How could such a tiny thing be among the most feared of monsters? Flash didn't answer the question. Instead, she shot one back, mocking, "A god, huh?" Her eyes flared. The wind howled. Two slashes flew like lightning, slicing toward the material god. The hardened body exploded at the points of impact, blasted to bits. Pain surged through his brain, every inch of skin and muscle screaming from the taste of death. Herk! Terror swept over the god. But when it looked again, wait, what? They were just standing there, staring each other down, sizing each other up. So where did that pain come from? Those visions of being slashed, were they illusions? It looked at the small ant nearby. Was that bloodthirst coming from her? Did her killing intent alone cause those hallucinations? Just how terrifying was her aura? How many had she slain? How many lives ended under her claws? The golden ant's foot lifted, and the ground sank in response. She locked onto the red eye. It looked soft, a perfect weak spot to drive her sharp claw into. But the material god was quick too. A reinforced tentacle swung up to block it. Clang! Her claw clashed with the tentacle, leaving a razor-thin red gash. Thin, but vicious. Wherever it struck, it cut right through the reinforcement and drew blood instantly. She was fast, much faster than the mantis, so the god hadn't even had time to fully reinforce that tentacle before it was sliced. But what it didn't know, that was just Flash's basic strength. Now her spiritual power surged. Her strength skyrocketed, launching a strike 6 times stronger than before, widening the attack range and aiming it straight for the eye. The slash carved through the eye, the body, the tentacle, and even took a chunk off the top of the black tower. The sheer power was monstrous. Its impact area was 100 times larger than the attacker's body, but still precise enough to avoid hitting Zelon, who was recovering behind. The mantis didn't blink, eyes fixed on the tiny cloaked back of his beloved. Flash stood there like she had nothing to do with the blast. Wasn't that a bit too terrifying? Just one hit? Thinking back, maybe it was worth sacrificing his head to her that day. And yet, despite all that overwhelming power, the red eye wasn't even torn. The god kept his gaze on Flash, and it knew this fight was just beginning to the ant. Glancing at his beloved wife, standing tall, Zelon couldn't help but mutter, So strong. Without even turning around, she clearly heard his voice. Zelon, does your injury still hurt? Ack! Just hearing that was enough for Mantis Boy to get why his wife was asking. The killing intent in the air had suddenly thickened, seeping right into his nose. Even though Zelon wasn't Flash's enemy, the pressure Flash exerted on the air was enough to scare a teammate like him, let alone an enemy. I will beat it hard for you, she said. A tentacle of the material god lunged out of the thick black smoke. It tore through the smoke and caught sight of Flash, then roared with laughter. Ha 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 ha! No wonder you're one of the 10 great beasts. Your power really is something else. After the laughter, its spirit energy spiked to a worrying level. Naturally, she stayed on high alert, watching every twitch of the enemy. All the tentacles twisted smoothly toward the right, curling together as if to form a perfect ring. A sudden chill ran down Zelon's spine. He shouted, Flash! Watch out! Oct laughed again, maniacally. All the coiled tentacles launched at once, wild and fast. It reused its old trick, making the base of the tentacles flexible while hardening the tips, turning them into deadly spears, stabbing madly at the ground where Flash had just been standing. No matter what angle, it wanted to pierce Flash to shreds. The ground shook violently, but did it really think that was enough to kill her? Bit of a stretch, no? Through of the dust, a streak of striking yellow zipped by. All she needed was a simple burst of speed, staying calm and dashing forward to strike back. Once again, she targeted the opponent's massive, glowing red eye, same as before. But this time, the material god noticed her aim. Lowering its gaze just slightly to focus on the little ant, it fired a huge beam of blue spiritual energy, just like the one it had tried to kill Zelon with earlier. Zelon had been watching the fight from a distance, and almost got caught in the blast too. The area of effect was massive. The material god clearly considered Flash, a member of the 10 great beasts, a far greater threat than Mantis Boy. So even though the attack looked similar, its energy and force were way stronger. Too strong. So this is what he's really capable of? But that was no surprise to Flash. She'd circled around stealthily through the dust clouds and launched a sudden strike with her sharp claws. Flash's slash ran along the tentacle of material god. The god didn't even turn around. It stopped the attack just like that. Grrr. I've given up on speed. I only pursue defense and strength. I'm the 5th-ranked god named Oct. With that, all the tentacles rose at once, intertwining as they moved to take out Flash. But they couldn't lay a finger on the little ant. Just like Oct said, speed wasn't its strength anymore. Meanwhile, that golden streak zipped easily between the frozen tentacle tips. The god may not have had speed, but the ant had it to spare. And on top of that, she had power constantly building. Strongest defense? That just makes me want to shred you more. She spun like a drill, her strike now boosted to 7 times the normal force. There was a faint crackling sound, something splattering all over, and then came more crackling, followed by splintering noises. A pure white arc of light appeared, curving around and wrapping itself around the enhanced tentacle. What the hell is that? Another illusion? Oct stared at the streak, unable to believe his eyes. This had to be another one of its tricks, right? How could his body be cracking? But it wasn't just Oct who saw it. Even Zelon saw it too. So how could it be a hallucination? Cut it open. The mantis' cheerful voice can be heard clearly by Oct. It examined it carefully and realized the slash wasn't disappearing. That meant the enhanced tentacle was really cut. Wounded in this form? No way. Oct had always taken pride in the superior defense, even if the God Group member never been able to land a hit on it. And now, this ant actually managed to do it? It's not even one of the top 10 fierce beasts. I focused all my force into a single blade and added the impact from my speed. That's enough to punch a hole in you. And just so you know, I've already gotten used to the hardness of your body. What the little ant didn't mention was that a 7x slash wasn't even the limit of her power. That's why Oct shouted naively, "You proud just for making one hole?" Thinking Flash had already used his full strength, Oct rushed in with his tentacles to attack, unaware that it just stepped into a trap. If I've already cut you once, then the rest will be easy. Around Flash, spiritual energy and brute power were tearing space apart. She just stood there, but the ground was automatically slicing, breaking, and flipping over. An 8-dike slash formed in the ant's hands. Once ready, boom, it shot out like lightning. Just as Flash said, both attack power and speed had leveled up. Where she launched from looked like a rocket sight, and her body blurred into a light beam, reflected crystal clear in Oct's pupils. Of course, Oct didn't move an inch. Instead, it poured all the energy into fortifying the body. Even its pupils were enhanced, though they didn't change color. And yet the sound, screech, shrieked like a blade scraping across sheet metal as the beam of light sliced through his eye. Flash finished the slash and immediately veered away before hitting the ground, while Oct writhed in pain as blood sprayed from a long gash across the big eye. Wherever the golden streak passed, the area was instantly cut, showing just how stable and vicious Flash's power really was. After slashing, she soared backward, then spiraled into the sky, like she was planning one more blow just to drive it home. The tentacles, though enhanced, had grown sluggish. They couldn't keep up with Flash's lightning speed. She moved like air, slipping through tight spots with ease. Where the golden light streaked, the ant himself was nowhere near anymore. She was already far away. She twisted through the air, weaving like mad to confuse Oct. Where would she strike? What part should be reinforced to avoid injury? Before Oct could finish thinking, one of the moving tentacles was sliced clean through by Flash. Only after the success came the ant's long, screeching laugh. She shot upward, then dove down like a bullet, the power of her slash transforming into a bolt of thunder slamming right into Oct's head. The loud boom echoed, and Oct's entire body sank into the ground. Its tentacles thrashed around like they'd lost their sense of direction. As for Flash, she stopped the moment the target was hit. Red sprayed in streams everywhere, but none of it was her. It was all Oct's. The wriggling tentacles below also sliced up. Flash touched the ground gently with no wound at all. To be honest, the 7-eye slash was already pushing it. Even though she pulled off the 8-eye slash and it worked, the blade now had a huge crack. This body still couldn't fully control such overwhelming power. She walked over to Zelon and asked, "You all right?" Flash's voice seemed to startle Mantis. He froze for a second. Then Zelion's eyes shifted to behind Flash, and he suddenly shouted, "Look out! It's still alive!" Before he even finished, the ant saw a familiar tentacle appear above her, 3 sharp tips aiming down, slamming into where she just stood. It was a sneak attack, fast and forceful, but Flash dodged it. She zipped away with a swish, landing right next to Zelon. Oct was still alive with a deep wound. Now Oct had to stand up using the tentacles while the whole body was wobbling like it could collapse any second. Even its voice had grown faint. "You made me miserable." Even though it wasn't often that Flash and Zelon showed up together, before they got split up for separate missions, the two used to meet up in the Misty Mountains pretty often when they had a chance. One fine day, under blue skies and fluffy clouds, Flash said to Zelon, "I want to leave this place and head to the Australian." Mantis looked surprised and asked how long she planned to be gone, but the golden ant didn't really know. "I just want to see, without my master, can I still get stronger? With only what I have now, how far can I really grow?" Flash said it with a determined look, like she'd been thinking about it for a long time before bringing it up to Zelon. "Maybe when I've learned to fully control that power, that's when I'll come back to my master." And the day she'd been waiting for, to test the strength she'd gained away from his master, came sooner than expected. Right off the bat, Oct dropped a bomb that kicked up a cloud of smoke and rubble. Flash got blown back, skidding across the ground until she stopped right next to Mantis. Seeing that fluttering cloak, Zelon sensed something was wrong and hesitated. "Hey Flash, are you all right?" The ant didn't say a word. The cracking sounds and the falling bits of armor answered for her. He had clearly dodged the enemy's attack just now, and still got hurt. Right in front of Flash now was the massive eye of that material god, looking just like a black hole ready to suck her in. Oct realized Flash had figured out she was wounded without direct contact and let out an excited roar. "You think just 'cause you're fast, I can't hit you?" It powered up, and soon the once fluid tentacles turned a dull, sickly gray. They cracked apart like ice, and then reformed into something entirely different. It all happened fast. In a blink, the material god's form had completely changed. The big eye had shifted to one side. All of the tentacles were now bunched up at the bottom. Top half and bottom half, both sturdy, both flexible. "Changing form again?" Zelon muttered, confused. "The last form already gave us trouble." It looked like shifting forms gave the material god some real joy. "You just hit the armor on the outside. You really think you can kill me?" Then Oct flung one of the arms. It stretched out like a whip and slammed it down right where Flash had just stood. The little ant leapt aside just in time, while the stone beneath split into chunks. Flash shot upward, coming face to face with the god's faceless face. No talking, no nonsense. She rushed in at top speed, slamming an 8-eye slash straight at the god's face, and the sound of impact boomed loud and clear. But when she looked, her pincer had only touched the god's skin, couldn't pierce through. Even with the power cranked up 8 times, not a scratch. Before she could even be shocked, the god opened his mouth in something like a twisted grin. Its body glowed, spiritual energy flaring up like a fiery outline. Flash knew something was off, and sure enough, Spiritual energy burst from every pore of the god's body, gathered into a massive force, and blasted toward Flash. One moment, Flash was an ant. The next, just a black blur flying backward. She gritted his teeth, resisting with everything she had, but the blast pushed her further and further, until the blue beam shot out from the top of the black tower, so fast and strong it looked like a shooting star blazing across the sky. It didn't stop after a few meters or a few kilometers. It shot right past the atmosphere of the planet, lighting up the dark void of space around it. "Flash!" Zelon called out in panic, choking in the dust. He couldn't charge in to find his friend. His own body was already on the verge of collapse. Luckily, Flash wasn't dead. She hadn't been blasted into space. She was still here. Though one arm and a pincer on her right side were completely shattered, her wings were torn in dozens of places, but she was alive, and that was all that mattered. The material god couldn't stand that look. "You underestimated me. That's why you lost your two arms." Flash didn't say a word to the material god. It seemed like not only the god's appearance had changed, even the fighting style was different now. The wound on Flash's arm was clear proof of that. Up till now, she still hadn't found the god's weakness, and Flash's attacks were mostly focused on raw power. So, she spread her wings again and shot forward toward the god, hoping to uncover the weak spot. But before she could even get close, her whole body suddenly seized up, locking in place. Even the spots that weren't injured earlier cracked open and began bleeding. She realized her body was resisting her will to fight, but she hadn't even pushed herself too far yet. How the hell did it come to this? "It's radiation," the god opened his mouth and explained. "I told you, my body's made from the minerals of this world. And those minerals? They're full of elements, one of which is radioactive. Here, anything over 4,000 sieverts can kill any living being." He looked at Flash's broken, battered body, then opened his mouth again. "As for the radiation I am emitting, it's 8.9 million sievert." Even Zelon, way off in the distance, was coughing his lungs out. He hadn't even joined the fight, yet the radiation was eating away at him too. He could feel his insides screaming in pain. But Flash didn't care what that bastard was doing or about to do. She kept charging forward with a confident growl. "Your end is here!" And yet, before she got close, something socked her straight in the face, sending her flying sideways. "If you were at full strength," the god sneered, "there's no way you wouldn't have dodged that slow-ass punch." She followed up with a barrage of punches, slamming down again and again where Flash had landed, trying to crush that small frame and the indomitable will inside it, all while laughing like a maniac. Then she switched from regular tentacles to enhanced ones, smashing even harder into Flash, who now had no way to fight back. Punch after punch rained down. No one knew how many had landed, until Flash's head and shoulders cracked open, blood spurting everywhere. She looked like she'd passed out cold. "Ha ha! And I wasn't even going full force." The god hurled the ant's body down to the ground with a loud crash. Flash was nothing more than a toy in its hands now. "I'm not going to kill you just yet," the god said, watching the blood-soaked, coughing ant with pure delight. "I'm going to keep playing with you for a while." Seeing Flash beaten like a rag doll, Zelon quietly called out, "Flash, let's escape into the void together." But even though she was wheezing and gasping, Flash still answered firmly, "No need. I'm still good." Still good? What the hell did that mean? No one knew, not even the god. "You really think you can still defeat me?" The god's voice full of mockery. This tiny, busted-up bug still refusing to give in? To prove she wasn't bluffing, Flash stomped her foot into the cracked ground. Her whole body lit up with a strange, fiery spiritual energy. "I'll tell you what I mean. You think I survived Australia by luck? If you want to call yourself a god, then open those eyes of yours and look real close. This is my true power." Pillars of spiritual flame surged up around Flash, and the god could feel its power levels spiking like crazy. But why? She was clearly soaked in extreme radiation. How did she still have the strength to summon spiritual energy? Her mind flashed back to those fights in Australia, when she tore through mountains and flipped whole cities on her own. Flash's feet dug into the shattered, jagged ground, and just like that, she stood tall and firm, ready to face off against enemies hundreds of times his size. 1, 2, even 3 or 4 at once. Even with her body all bruised up, she still stood tall and shouted, "Come, let's continue fighting. I won't stop until I've mastered that power." No sooner had she finished shouting than Flash charged straight at his opponent's face. Mad Ant might have been battered, but she wasn't broken. More than that, she'd made a promise. "If I can't master that power, then you guys can kill me right here." Back on that day in Australia, when they couldn't bring her down, then don't even dream she'd back off now. All those fights that pushed her to the edge only made her come back stronger. Flash had broken through her own limits long ago. The material god just stood there and got blasted with wind and dust till its throat almost flipped inside out. As for Zelon, he couldn't see a damn thing. Flash, standing dead center in that storm of energy, kept pouring out more and more. In no time, her aura lit up the whole top of the dark tower. And not just lit it, it pierced thousands of meters into the sky, like she was trying to stab a hole through the heavens. What is that? The god was trying to figure that out. After unleashing her power, Flash entered a completely new form. Her tiny ant body was painted in a strange yet familiar shade of red. That form carried a heavy pressure just from the glare in her eyes. Oct could clearly sense that Flash's aura was totally different from before. If it weren't for that same arrogant vibe, Octave thought it was someone else entirely. The moment Flash showed up like that, Zelon noticed immediately. This was the form they had achieved together when they fused their powers back then to fight the humans. Zelon had even sacrificed his life so Flash could absorb him. Yes, when I just started using this power, my body started to crumble due to the backlash. That's why I never used this power. Only when I was in Australia, wandering at the edge of life several times, did I master this power. Now come, I can exert my full strength this time. She even shouted some bold lines, which the radioactive octopus found hilarious. That thing had already become a material god, while Flash had just powered up a little and already started bragging. Before the radioactive octopus could even shut its mouth, Flash gave it a slap across the face that rattled its soul. Her sharp blade sliced through like lightning, too fast to even register, let alone dodge. A blinding golden streak slashed across the god's mouth, cutting through thick defenses and blasting it backward. Surprised? Laugh all you want. Now your head's split and blood's flying everywhere. Flash had thought this thing was divine or something, but seeing that blood spill out proved otherwise. If it bleeds, it's still just meat and flesh. No matter how much it evolves, it ain't no real god. Oct was hit hard, not just in the flesh, but in the ego. It launched a direct attack at Flash while screaming, "Don't get cocky. Even if you're stronger now, the radiation in your body won't just disappear. You'll be dead before you can kill me, you stupid ant." No time to waste. Flash had to win fast. While dodging attacks, she found the perfect angle and unleashed another deep cut, this one slicing right by the material god's crimson eye. Blood gushed out like a fountain, forcing Oct winced in pain and stumbled back, eyes shut tight. With the upper hand, Flash didn't hesitate. She kept charging in. This time, the little ant didn't just want to slash through the shell. She wanted to carve straight into the material god's core. Crushing the core meant certain death. That thought alone made Oct tremble. Instinctively, it raised its arms to shield its chest. The tiny, arrogant creature it once looked down on now had the power to kill it before it could even think about reincarnating. The material god quickly gathered its energy and exploded in a massive blast, unleashing a blinding surge of light far larger than itself, shooting out like a lightning bolt and engulfing Flash completely. It looked terrifying, but was completely useless. Flash straight up said it to its face. This kind of attack doesn't work on me anymore. And she was right. Took the hit head on without a scratch. Unbelievable, but it didn't stop there. Flash, while still midair inside that energy storm, sliced clean into the material god's face without flinching. She unleashed a ninefold strike, sending massive waves of blade energy smashing into that enormous blast of spiritual force, pushed back the explosion and tore straight into the god's body. That one full-powered hit shredded the radioactive octopus into a mess of torn limbs. Even Flash's own allies couldn't believe what he was seeing, that she could actually slice the material god into chunks and send pieces flying. But it still wasn't over. The god wasn't dead yet, so Flash had to go in again, ready to end it for good. One more blow would do it. No, it didn't want to die like that. Staring down an enemy coming in full force, it finally admitted, "Your speed really is insane. Then I'll seal it away." As soon as it spoke, the ground rumbled. Rocks shot up and trapped Flash in a tight cage. "Let's see you dance now, stuck in that tiny space. Try pulling your tricks in there." Oct laughed hard. It must have been scared out of its mind to throw up a dirt cage that huge. Compared to Zelon standing outside, that thing was at least 100 times his size. If even a massive energy storm couldn't stop Flash, what made it think some rocks would do the trick? Boom! It exploded into 1,000 pieces. Rocks went flying in every direction, and the material god got blasted back 100 meters. Blood poured non-stop from around its eye, but it didn't dare blink, because as long as it was still breathing, that crazy ant wouldn't stop coming. Flash shot out from the rubble like a demon, her tiny mouth spewing more terrifying words. "Your defense is useless now. You're the toughest god to break, sure, Other beasts might struggle with you, but you met me. Her wild eyes and razor blade, fused with her very flesh, stayed locked on the material god. One more hit, just one more. But right then, Flash's body started to crack. Blood sprayed from every joint and seam. Even his trusty claws began falling apart. The radiation inside her had taken a turn for the worse. It hurt like hell, but of course she wouldn't give up. Just one more strike. Flash poured everything she had into stabbing the god's core. Her massive spiritual force slammed into that blood-red eye, but also pushed his own body past its limit. Too bad. More blood sprayed from her, and the strike didn't pierce through. There was still a sturdy layer of defense left, and she couldn't reach it. The god roared, "Gods don't die that easy. And look at you. You're not doing too well either. The victory is mine." That would have been true if this were a one-on-one fight. So caught up in battling Flash, she had completely forgotten she had a partner. Another blade suddenly joined the fray, and Oct was completely stunned. How could it not be? Even Flash was surprised. Behind every great woman, there is a great husband. That was the perfectly saying about that moment. That so-called perfect defense started to crack under the combined fury of Zelon and Flash. All the material god could do was stare, wide-eyed, as two tiny bugs screamed and sliced into him. The cracks grew bigger and deeper. Panic set in. Finally, after countless strikes, the shell shattered. Glass-like fragments rained down behind it, and there, exposed at last, the god's hidden core. All Oct could do was staring back with those terrified, bulging eyes, and that's when Flash and Zelon smacked it dead center, right in the pupil. One jab, and blood sprayed out, dark red and violent. The god was officially done for, couldn't even form words. All it could mumble was, didn't expect I'd, Its torn-up body slumped backward, trying to make a dramatic fall, like a hero's last stand. But before it could even hit the ground, pop! It exploded into tiny fragments, scattering and vanishing bit by bit into the air. All that was left in front of the newlywed was dust and smoke from that brutal fight. Not even a single tentacle remained. The ground was cracked all over. The two of them were still catching their breath, worn out and broken. Each had lost a claw, slowly dropping down from the sky in exhaustion. Flash gasped, "I finally defeat it. Even my blades have shattered." Without Zelon fighting beside her, she might not have taken down that material god at all. The main enemy was gone, but their job wasn't finished. They still had to clean up the leftover monsters down below. But man, they were dead tired. Flash figured she'd take a breather, just a little. But life never plays out like you plan. The rocks behind them started floating upwards. Both of them instantly felt something weird in the air. The top of the dark tower, which had been shattered, suddenly got bathed in a bright blue pillar of light shooting down from the sky. It wrapped around the tower, making it glow like some cursed monument. What the hell? Wasn't the god already dead? Zelon looked up, confused. No clue where that beam came from, or if the tower itself was glowing. Someone tell Mantis what's going on, please. Good thing. Someone who could explain had just arrived. Hey, this ain't good. That energy coming from the beam, it's getting stronger and stronger. Flash, Zelon, destroy it, now! Flash looked up at Big Bird, wanting to ask when Big Bird barked right at them. That pillar, it's part of a formation. I don't know what it's about to do, but we can't leave it be. Got it. No time to waste. Flash acted immediately. The ground beneath her kept crumbling, rising and sinking, as her spiritual force surged out too fast, too wild. But just as the raging energy built up, it suddenly spun out of control, firing in all directions and even slamming into Flash. She let out a faint little gasp before her body cracked with a sharp clang, pieces of her armor flying off. The force of her own power flung her back like a rag doll. Zelon, who was supposed to be standing nearby, had already dashed behind and caught the little ant. He'd lost one arm too, but still used him whole body to shield his wife. "Flash," he called softly, seeing how wrecked she was. The ant looked dazed, like she was slipping into unconsciousness. Zelon knew he wasn't as strong as his wife. He hadn't been much help in the final battle, and his body was already overflowing with radiation. "I barely have the strength to stand, but I have to destroy that pillar. Big Bird, catch!" The toss jolted Flash awake midair. Seeing herself far from Mantis, away from the glowing pillar, fear kicked in. Flash shouted, "What are you doing, Zelon?" "What else?" His voice was calm but firm. "You can't always take everything on yourself. You rest. I'll handle this one." With the power they had left, destroying that thing wasn't going to be easy. "I'll have to take the whole tower with me," he added. "To the void." And that explained everything. Zelon wasn't a fighter. His strength was never about brute force or heavy defense. Once, Yuziyu had even asked her, "What right do you have to stand beside Flash? Keep going like this, and you'll only hold her back. His growth wasn't like other beasts. He couldn't just fight and level up easily. It took the guidance of the willow tree to help him develop spatial powers and give him a chance to prove himself. He had his doubts. Could he really stand at the same height as his wife? "Master," he cried inside, "you were wrong. I can fight side by side with Flash." A surge of violent energy exploded around him, shaking the area. Zelon focused on one goal, proving he wasn't a burden. And this was his moment to end everything. He swung his remaining claw high, channeling all his might into a single strike. A burst of glowing jade-green energy flashed brilliantly as her claw came down on the pillar. The slash sliced through the tower clean and sharp, spiritual force pouring in like it was cutting through jelly. "No!" Flash shouted, diving off the peregrine falcon. "Blue Mantis!" She yelled his name, his real name. Behind her, Big Bird cried out, "Flash, come back! That energy will consume you!" But there was no stopping her now. Flash dove like a golden beam straight into the heart of the light. Her yellow glow disappeared into the emerald blaze. Even the black tower was being devoured by that brilliance. Big Bird banked hard to dodge the beam. "Zelon? Flash?" The bird called out in panic, eyes brimming with tears. He knew exactly what it meant when Flash turned back. But wait, from the thick smoke, something shot out like a bolt. It rocketed upward, then lost momentum and fell. Beneath Peregrine Falcon's wings, a giant crater marked where someone had basically scooped up the black tower and the earth under it. That thing flying from the smoke, it was Zelon holding his wife in his arms. Whatever happened inside, Flash came out with only the upper half of her body. Zelion's face crumpled. Her breath was very weak. "I won't let you die. Never again." She meant that moment, back when she had eaten Mantis to get stronger. That memory, it never left her. Flash had increased her resistance to protect Zelon, and now look at her, a gaping hole in her chest, no lower body. How could she survive this? Tears poured down Zelion's cheeks. "Don't die, Flash, please, Big Bird," he cried. "Life essence, quick." Peregrine Falcon definitely wanted to save Flash too, but he was here to deliver the message. There was no life essence was with him. If he'd had it, he would have given it to Flash long already. "Forget it," Flash rasped, speaking weakly to her husband. "Blue Mantis, this name indeed still suits you best." Mantis wanted to scream, "Don't give up, we're both staying alive." But Flash, maybe she couldn't hear anymore. "Flash, wake up, Flash!" Zelon sobbed, frantic, clutching what was left of his wife. His words tumbled out in chaos. "Help me, please, someone, help, anyone." With only one claw left, he tried to hold Flash tighter. Big Bird could only watch from above, crying in silence. The vast world below echoed with nothing but Zelion's screams. "Someone help me, anyone, please!" He didn't even know who he was begging anymore. God or demon? Then, a gentle flutter. A pristine white feather spread out gently. The sky turned bright and warm when White Crane had arrived with Moonfox. Their presence, pure and radiant, filled the battlefield with hope. Zelon forgot his tears for a moment. "Is that an angle?" Even Peregrine Falcon froze, staring at the stunning divine couple. White Crane beamed at them. "Someone called for me? Well, here I am." He held a fresh bottle of life essence between his beak. And don't even ask where he's been lately. Every time White Crane shows up, people can't help but gasp in awe. Chap 3 and 44. The fortress ruled by the Free Alliance. The battle had only just begun. A god, beast-like in appearance, flaunted his green pincers as if no one else were around. He chuckled mockingly. "Ha ha! You are all so tiny." Before he could finish, a pillar of spiritual energy burst out around him, cutting his laughter short. He could feel his strength rising significantly. This could only mean other gods had just been killed. He made up his mind instantly. He would wipe them all out in one go, and then leave. Because if all of them were wiped out, he would become the strongest one. Elsewhere, the volcano of the nature god was raging furiously, locked in a direct clash with the crimson lotus solar flare of the Brother Nine. Within the pillar of flame, a panda blasted through the inferno and punched the nature god straight in the face. Out of nowhere, before his eyes appeared, were those seeds? Brother Nine thought they were about to explode, but instead they thickened into vines and tightly coiled around his entire body. This was the natural growth of the nature god. Whatever it touched drained of spiritual energy. Wine deity was pinned down, with the nature god's gaping mouth about to come crashing down from above. No way! He unleashed the frozen fist, freezing the vines solid, then shattered them to pieces. "Your child's play can't fight without sneak attacks, huh? Is that all the power a god like you has?" His arrogance drove the nature god into a fury. It roared back, "The creatures from your planet, are they always so arrogant?" A violent whirlwind swirled around the god's body. This is what it called god physique. The aura now radiated overwhelming pressure, but Wine Deity only grew more excited. Finally going all out, huh? This is going to be an earth-shattering fight, and he couldn't wait to dive right in. Somewhere else, two opponents were sizing each other up, both extremely cautious. The god facing off against Yule opened with mockery. Your spiritual power, it's not what I expected. Oh, keep thinking that, Yule replied coldly. You'll regret it once you're dead. The god laughed. Me? Die. Don't be ridiculous. I control death in this world. Without even waiting to fight, he transformed into his god physique, a skeletal figure cloaked in a dark robe. He introduced himself with confidence. I am the god of death. Yule raised his hand, laughing. What a joke. A swarm of warheads appeared, locked and loaded. Even gods must die someday. The missiles flew toward the death god in a frenzy, yet he stood there, taking the hits head-on. Riddled with holes, he remained unfazed. Death cannot be chosen, he declared. Raising his staff, the death god summoned an army of corpses and stood behind them, ready to decide the fate of his enemies. Skeletons charged at Yule, weapons in hand. But even if they were undead, bones still contain about 70% minerals, including iron. And iron is metal. How could it resist magnetism? Yule clenched his fist. The skeletons were crushed instantly. Bones cracked and scattered across the ground, right in front of the death god, who didn't flinch. My life, Yule smirked, will not be decided by you, the god shrieked madly. Interesting. Show me how strong your human race really is. All right, Yule said. Let me show you magnetic enhancement. This skill harnessed magnetic force, endurance, and reaction speed, condensing what would take 1 out of 15 years of a normal human. Before the transformation finished, the god lunged forward, but Yule simply flicked his hand and sent him flying. The force stunned the god. Confused, he charged again, only to get a physics lesson. Everything in this universe is made of atoms. That includes your spiritual power. I can alter its structure using magnetism, he smirked. Not that you'd understand. Guess I'll beat it into you instead. You're calling me stupid. Furious, the god of death swung his staff and leapt forward. What's so hard to understand? You can cancel out my spiritual energy. So what? But that wasn't all. With incredible speed, Yule zipped straight at the god of death. Death curse! The god swept his staff in a wide arc, unleashing a spell that condensed deathly resentment. Anyone it touches will die. It sounded like scary stuff, but right then, Yule's hand shot forward, grabbed the god's head, and silenced him instantly. What was that? Couldn't quite hear you. With a glare, the god of death skidded backward, his white skeleton shattered, revealing red flesh beneath. Enraged and bewildered, he couldn't grasp what just happened. How did he ignore my death curse and just charge in? Yule landed softly. Dangling from his hand was the god's broken arm. Skulls, spirits, it's all just energy. He crushed it effortlessly, like popping a plastic bag. Simple as that. Now, let's sum things up for you guys. The battle records of the mythical beast from Misty Mountain. After clashing with the 12 crazy gods of Azure Star, all in this one handy snapshot. 5 gods down, that still left 7. And now, with each fallen god, the rest grew even stronger. The war had only grown fiercer. The difficulty had skyrocketed. Anyone facing the remaining 7 would feel unbearable pressure. Let's rewind a few decades, to the early days of the world's spiritual energy awakening. This was the first time a wave of spiritual energy had struck, without a single warning. And humanity was the first to fall victim. People were slaughtered, devoured, torn apart in numbers far beyond any other species. The early-stage spiritual surge caused other creatures to grow monstrously large. To them, humans became nothing but food. There was no concept of superhumans back then. Sometimes only a few scattered survivors remained. Among the ruins, a young man ran with his face covered in blood, breath ragged. He didn't understand what had happened to the world. Why had everything turned into this nightmare? He sprinted through a hellish landscape of screams, shattering walls, and towering mutant beasts rampaging in every direction. They were too busy devouring others to notice him, but the terror was everywhere. In his heart, he chanted a name, Arie. You have to be safe. He pushed on, heading toward Arnie's house, hoping to find her alive among the dying embers. He ran and ran until his eyes widened in horror. Right in front of him, a massive beast, the size of a 5-story building, lifted its grotesque head. In its jaws, something dangled. Backlit by flames, he could still see it clearly. A girl's hand hung lifeless. He didn't want to believe that it was his beloved Arie. The crunch of bone and flesh echoed clearly, but his ears went numb. He refused to hear it until the beast swallowed her whole and ended with a satisfied swallow. That's when the young man's jaw finally moved. First an ah, then a long roar, but no words came out. Terror, pain, heartbreak, all surged together. And that wave of emotion, allowed spiritual energy to flood into every pore of his body. He clenched his muscles, mixed it with rage, and exploded. In an instant, Yule awakened as a superhuman. Turns out, his fully wrapped appearance wasn't some edgy fashion choice. It became part of his body when he transformed. The power to control magnetism, Yule never chose it. Once again, he unleashed dozens of spiritual warheads to attack his enemy. His opponent, the god of death, leading a writhing army of bones and beasts of every shape and size. They charged in, roaring and rumbling. The warheads struck them one by one, exploding nonstop. Smoke and fire shot up into the sky, turning the entire field into a blazing sea. Amid the rain of bombs and flames, only the god of death stood untouched. He slammed his staff into the ground, and a spiritual shield flared up, blocking the searing heat just in time to see a bandaged figure charging straight at him. Yule attacked without mercy, one strike after another, fast, relentless, unyielding. The god of death immediately activated defense mode. A swirling purple barrier began forming layers linked together into an absolute defense. Too bad it wasn't fast enough. Yule reached him first, with a brutal punch smashed straight into the death god's face, knocking his head sideways, shattering even the absolute defense. The god's eyes burned with fury. He had just been punched through his shield. Unacceptable. He summoned two massive beast heads, which opened their jaws and began charging two gigantic spheres of spiritual energy aimed directly at Yule. He didn't care that he was standing nearby too. He let the beasts blast the entire area where Yule stood, with the intent on taking him out, no matter the cost. The two summoned beasts prepared to fire again, ready to blow Yule's head clean off. But he was nowhere in sight. Even the god of death was confused. Dead already? His power hasn't dissipated yet. There was he in the smoke, but it felt kinda strange. Not quite right. Fake? In that instant, he realized. It was a clone. It was the clone that took the explode. Then came the sound. A soft step on the smoke-covered ground. Yule knew his opponent had figured it out, but he didn't laugh but just simply appeared calmly and offered a quiet message. If this were any other mutant beast, you might have been hard to deal with, but against me, I might actually be able to beat you. Before he even finished, his hand swung up dozens of spiritual warheads ready to rain down again. Yule was humble in words, but in action, he gave it everything he had, or more. Maybe he was too humble, because to the god of death, it all sounded like delusional nonsense. The god gripped his staff tightly, then let out a low, choking chuckle that grew into full-blown laughter. Ha! Yule, who had zero sense of humor, had no idea what was so funny. He didn't crack a joke. What the hell are you laughing at? That only made the god laugh harder. You're really something. The way he said it, like praising a child for singing a cute song. Yule didn't need a sense of humor to know he was being mocked. His eyes widened, fierce and threatening. You think I can't kill you? Just because you call yourself a god? This time, the god of death didn't say a word. He slowly raised his staff. Purple spiritual energy surged up like flames flickering on a stove. It swirled, fused into a massive form, the shape of a cloaked figure. But it was hard to tell what exactly it was, aside from two glowing eyes and a round, shadowy head. I told you already, this trick doesn't work, Yule growled, and yet you still cling to it. He was about to charge in. But then the god of death spoke up, calm and casual. I'd advise you not to attack. He glanced toward the mysterious figure. At that moment, a pale, human-like arm emerged. Around its wrist was a familiar purple bracelet. Anyone else might not recognize it, but Yule couldn't possibly miss it. Not after all these years. And then he saw the golden hair. The hair he'd tied up himself just the day before taking his daughter to school. The same golden hair that looked just like her mother's. Yule's face went pale. Stone-cold composure. Shattered in an instant. It was like seeing a ghost. Was it really a ghost? The girl's blue eyes looked at him, soft and sorrowful, then she moved her lips. Daddy! A tidal wave of memories crashed into him back when the terror of seeing Arie swallowed whole. The explosion of rage that made him awaken as a superhuman to kill all the beast. Ripping her out of its gut, he had held her in his arms, lying there on the ground. She had stopped breathing, but there was still a smile on her face, as if she knew that her father had evolved, that he had become strong enough to survive this cruel new world. And that was the last time he saw Arie. How many years had passed since then? The world had endured 3 spiritual surges. He had crossed galaxies, landed on another world, only to see his daughter again like this, and calling him, Daddy? He dropped his head, voice trembling. Arie, my girl. His sorrow was the god of death's delight. He burst into wild laughter. Ha! Reunited with your daughter after all these years. How touching. The words had barely left his mouth when Yule erupted. pillar of spiritual energy exploded from his body, just like the first time he had awakened. Amid the roaring energy, he screamed, "An illusion! You dare use that to try and stop me? Fakes will never become real. You dared to mock the dead to toy with my daughter. I won't forgive you." Facing Yule's seething hatred, the god of death remained completely unfazed. "Oh, did I forget to mention? This isn't an illusion. I've fully restored the girl, both her body and her soul. She's alive, right here in front of you." Arie stood still like a doll, but the more you looked, the more lifelike she appeared. The longer Yule stared, the more his mind wavered. The voice of the god of death echoed beside his ear coldly. "If you don't believe me, then kill her." Long ago, before the early waves of spiritual energy crashed down on Earth, people still buried their pets. She had dug it herself without asking her father for help. And now, in silence, she was filling it in alone. Seeing his daughter looking sad but holding it in, Yule gently offered, "I'll buy you another one later." Her voice turned firm. "I don't want another. No matter how well we care for them, we always have to say goodbye in the end. Their lives are too short. I don't want to go through this again. Never." Yule didn't argue about the no more pets part, but out there in the world, there were things his daughter still didn't understand. The lifespans of creatures on this planet are all different, Arie. Some can live for hundreds of years. Some only get 7 days. He paused for a moment, as if weighing whether to go on. Should he really talk about endings with a child? But when he saw her eyes, full of quiet expectation, he continued, "The meaning of life isn't about how long you live. It's about whether you lived each day well. When your life reaches its end, only then will you truly be ready." Arie didn't seem shocked by those words. It was like she had already made up her mind. She was always a smart kid. Now she stood, looking at her father with a completely new form. It felt like some kind of twisted joke. Yule's calm vanished. Behind the bandages wrapped around him, his brows tightened visibly. "You mean?" Arie came back to life? Behind the girl, the being nodded proudly. "For a god like me, this is nothing difficult. But that's not all." That's when the god of death casually summoned 2 more glowing purple columns, just like the one used to create Arie earlier. The moment these 2 finished forming, they looked around in bewilderment. Where are we? What happened to the mutant antelope? The one next to him, with curly gray hair, quickly recognized the familiar face standing before him and blurted out in disbelief, Captain, is that you?" Yule was stunned. Weren't these his former squad members? They might have looked all tough in the past, but they were human too, full of feelings, of camaraderie. They had fought alongside him against countless super beings, bonded in blood and fire. Now that he saw them clearly, it was them. He couldn't hold it in. "Connor! Edward!" Yule had fought through hundreds of battles, both against humans and monsters alike. He'd watched countless teammates die to get to where he stood now, and this bastard god of death had the gall to bring them back. Just to shake him? Furious, Yule cursed aloud and charged straight toward the smug bastard, fists clenched, ready to deck him. But to his shock, his resurrected comrades lunged toward him, full of murderous intent. Connor's arm began to mutate into a weapon, and though he didn't stop his charge, he suddenly cried out, "Captain, move!" Right as he shouted, his thorny arm whipped down like a chain, slamming into where Yule had just stood. Next to him, Edward transformed his arm into a massive blade and swung down a killer blow. The clash in the air was intense, forcing Yule to back off. He hit the ground hard, trying not to get thrown too far. The armor around his head cracked wide open, and blood streamed down from his eye. He'd fought the god of death all this time without a scratch, but one hit from them, and he was bleeding. The god of death saw that flicker of pain in Yule's eyes and laughed loud and long. "I told you, I can bring back anyone I want. Not only that, I can make them stronger. Kill him." At the god's command, both monsters charged at Yule, swinging down like lumberjacks. It was unclear if they still had their minds, but their attacks came fast and brutal. One punched down, then the other opened his mouth, and bam! A massive tentacle shot straight out of it, slamming into Yule's chest with an explosion. Edward didn't stop. His clawed arm, covered in spikes, raked down in one savage slash. Rip! The sound tore the air as if Yule had been split in half. He could have fought back, but he didn't. Not once. The god of death raised his staff, pumping more power into the 2 beasts he'd created. Laughing, he sneered, "What's wrong? Can't fight your former companions?" Yule hit the ground hard, sending up a wave of dust. He heard what the god said, but he didn't resist. Lying there, it felt like he was sinking into the river of hell, hands from the dead reaching up to drag him down. Familiar hands, old friends, fallen comrades. Everyone was dead. Family, friends, companions, all gone, only he remained. In reality, there were no hands. It was just the despair inside Yule that wanted to give up. Then he heard it, Connor's voice, muffled by the tentacle in his mouth. Captain, please, kill me. Nearby, Edward wept too. I don't want to fight you either. Yule didn't make a move, he whispered. This is what I owe you. If it wasn't for you covering me back then, you wouldn't have died. Looking at Connor, who now looked more like a beast than a man, Yule's voice trembled. Connor, your son's grown up now. He's married. He's got a beautiful kid. Edward, your little brother works in logistics now. No more front lines. He no longer has to fight in the front lines. Tears streamed down Edward's twisted face. How many more seconds would the god of death allow them to speak? They still had their memories, but their bodies had been turned into murder machines. They knelt before Yule, maybe for the last time, with tears drenched their faces. Thank you, Captain. Thank you. Yeah, the god of death had done it on purpose. Let them say their goodbyes. You can use magnetic fields to alter the structure of spirit power, but the ones dragging you down into the pits of hell now are a bunch of living dead. Your ability is useless against them. You can just follow them into the abyss of the dead. Suddenly, the ground beneath the god of death quaked violently. Then, a massive explosion of spiritual force tore the air. It wasn't just a pillar of energy, it was a wave. In the center of it stood Yule, cloaked in black, floating midair. Chunks of rock, both big and small, circled him. The god of death was stunned. What's happening? You managed to break through that move? It's simple. Yule wasn't giving up anymore. You want to know? Yule said coldly. Ever since I joined the Master's side, I haven't had to go all out, not once. But now, I want to see just how strong I really am. He raised a hand, and massive buildings ripped from the ground. They tilted, slammed into each other, and the quake spread so far it reached the battle where Wine Deity was fighting. Nearby, the dwarves who were brawling had to stop. All their weapons had flown sky high. Wine Deity found a clearer spot, lifted his head, and watched the one-in-a-million sight unfolding. The unbreakable black pillar was now floating like a feather right behind Nature God. Even the god Nature was shocked silent. The lava dragon had to swerve through the air just to avoid the debris, watching in awe as the pillar took flight. This is really happening? What are you trying to do? The god of death roared. Yule's voice came back, cold as steel. You call yourself an immortal god? Then let me take you somewhere special.